But what's more important, yo, look at that. Isis, there she is. Look at that. And so Bartholdi, he lived in Colmar. And he was a Freemason. And I think it was in 1886 he went to Egypt for inspiration. And when he came back with this here. People say this is the light bearer, so that means Lucifer. But do you see any light? I don't see any light. There is no light. But what I do see, it's supposed to be like represent fire. So that's because of the 4 elements which are in the statue integrated. That's why there are the 7 rays. And the 7 rays is the number of a pyramid. I already told you so. The square and compass. The square, it stands for the number 4. There are the 4 elements. You see, there's a lot of air here. There's fire. There's earth, you know, just standing on this thing here. And there should be water. Oh yeah, there's a big lake next to it. Oh, that's the water. But of course in New York, there's a lot of water around it. So the 4 elements, they are there. And that's the, with the number 4, number 3, you can make a pyramid. Because the square stands for number 4. There are 4 sides in it. And the sides, it's a triangle. So it stands for the number 3. For Isis, Horus, and Seth. So Isis is here. Horus is always everywhere. Seth. With his Seth on, or Satan. He's supposed to be everywhere. And probably, well, this here is the New World Order, the new system, which is a horizontal rule. I already explained it to you dozens of times. In the aristocracy there was a law which was called the primogenitura, that only the firstborn son, he would get everything. But there was also 2nd, 3rd and 4th sons, and they wanted to rule as well. So for them there was nothing. So that's why there were so many conspiracies, like in the castle, you know, to get the power. Well, backstabbings, poisonings. For them there was a tradition to go into a monastery because the firstborn son, he didn't want him anymore in the castle. So he threw him out. And there were only 3 things in the Middle Ages. The aristocracy, the church and the people. And of course they didn't want to hide among the people. Because you have to work, you know, and be in the cow shit and pig shit up to your neck. And an aristocrat doesn't work. And so they went into a monastery, and at a certain moment there were so many in the monastery, they said, we're in a monastery, which is a temple of God, and so we are the Templars, and we're going to make a new system that every one of us can be the king for a period of 4, 5 or 7 years, which became a horizontal rule, and it's in the book. It's all this, the description of it is in the book. I don't know what it says here. The 4th of July, yeah. Well, that's when the American New World Order took place, and they like chased away the firstborn son. That's the English king, yeah. Do I get it? That's why Mr. Trump, he can't do what he wants, because there's always the Senate and the Congress who say, no, Donald, we all rule together, yeah. And so actually, this is the son. Horus is this here, the book, the New World Order, and the new man as well. That's why we had so many world wars, you know, to raise man new from scratch and not anymore after the image of God. There was no more tradition from a father to a son, and the children were risen, you know, by the telly and only by the mothers, like, you know, you see what I mean? So this is the 7 rays. Actually, the 7 rays stands for a pyramid, and it stands for the square and compass. just like skull and bones, which is 3, 2, 2. If you add it up, you get to number 7. And I put the G in the middle of the square and compass, which happens to be the 7th letter as well. So, but look at the face. Is that a woman? Hey mate, it's a bloke. It's a bloody homo, isn't it? Well, this is Seth at the same time. It's Isis and it's Seth. You know, because the women, they have an alliance with the devil. Just like in the Bible with Adam and Eve, you know. Because there was the first rite, you know, the Jus Prime Noctis in the Middle Ages. You know, she had, on the first night of her marriage, she had to sleep with the Lord in the castle. And he really, you know, shagged her, you know what I mean? And many women, they didn't like it, you know, they burned them later on, the ones who didn't want to go into this collaboration with the evil ones, with the pharaohs actually, because the aristocracy, they're from Pharaoh. So they, you know, they said, well, some of them said, well, after all, it was not so bad. He was a prince after all, he got some wine, you know, he was smelling good. So there was an alliance took place. This is the real story of Adam and Eve actually. Our women, they're not real women anymore, they have an alliance with the aristocracy due to this, yeah? So this is what the 7 rays mean. It means Isis, Horus and Seth for the 3 here. And water, fire, air, and earth for the other 4, which is the base of a pyramid, and the 3 stands for the side of a pyramid. So with this, you know, and the name of this guy here in Colmar, actually this is Route de Strasbourg, going to Strasbourg, where there's the European Parliament. From here to there, it's going to the European Parliament, where they rule Europe. It looks like the Babylon Tower. And they have a very important school. I filmed that one where the French president was in it. It's in a former Templars commandery. It's called l'ENA, l'École Nationale de l'Administration. Even foreign presidents, they get taught here how to lie to us, because the word parliament is from the French parler et mentir, to talk and to lie. You remember Lafayette, you know, the American New World Order. It has nothing to do with Illuminati or all that, you know. The Illuminati is just one of the older Freemason lodges. But this one here, who gave this Statue of Liberty to the US, they are far more dangerous. It's the French Freemason Lodge, Voltaire et les Neuf Sœurs. And yeah. Wow.
Yo, back in this bitch for more podcasting. Go deep. Episode 238, I'm pretty sure it's 238 this week. I know we just did another one the other day, but y'all probably know my tricks by now. Y'all probably know that, you probably know that I'm just stalling right now, and that's all good. So, 235, I saw 236, 237. Oh, we at 237, okay. So I'm not stalling anymore, guys. I hope you're keeping along. Hope you're keeping up. So, all right. Hope you saw that. Oh, shit. Sorry about that. Hope y'all like that intro. Jesus. I saw that intro already because I put that shit out yesterday. I got one of my homeboys who's a Mason. He came. He said something about that video. I might have him on the show soon. I don't know when. I might even interview him. I won't interview him today. I probably have a part 2 to this shit and have Will Rollins on the show. You got to speak up for his Masonic homeboy, so give him some time on the show. But before we get into anything, I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to put this interview. I got a Sean Atwood interview. I think it's going to go perfectly with us because, as you see in the title, this shit is called Cults. Well, I'm making up the title right now in my head, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be called something like Cults, the Snyder Cut Movement, Secret Societies, and probably your mama somewhere posted in there. So let's get to some music. Let's come right back, and then we'll get into my part of the interview podcast, and then I'm going to throw some Sean Atwood in there because they are both white boys, and, you know, white boys got a better credibility track record than me. You bitch.
Bitch, I want my motherfucking money back.
You only gave me $5.
I gave you 20 motherfucking dollars.
No, you did. You only gave me $5.
No, I gave you 20. And I ain't gonna sit here and argue with your flat ass face, homegirl. I want my fucking change back.
Go home, or you only gave me $5. You know I gotta get change back.
You know what's the thing about y'all Chinese motherfuckers?
Chinese? Me no Chinese, me Japanese. Don't take it as I You gotta have
Homegirl, don't be talking that little Japanese shit over here. This is America.
Americaって何でいいのもうお疲れだもう
I'ma blow this motherfucker up if I don't get my motherfucking change.
どっか行きなさいもうお疲れ Go home. Go home.
Homegirl, talk English, not this Japanese shit.
Homeboy, go home.
Well, I ain't leaving nowhere till I get my motherfucking change.
いいからお疲れだ
You don't sound like my ass. I want my fucking change.
いいから Go home. Go home. Talk to him.
I'm gonna hear my ass
Talk
on
to
girl.
him.
Get my fucking change. I ain't paying.
Please stand by for further details. We return you now to your regularly scheduled program.
Double exposure, wild lens view, check for dentures and niggas next to push the bins through. You know the glow, iced out rings, long dough, spandex, mosquito, whole bitches letting they thong show. I played the game, took plenty paper, still remain the same Asian name, barrel link chain, letting my piece hang domestic. No more crime played, but still connected. It's ethics, calculated steps through geometrics, waves spinning, double shades of base linen, 9-7 expedition displayed with all the trimmings. Travel light, push the LS on casual nights. Have you ever puffed the chalice weed pipe? That shit I have you right. I roll dice, trying to divorce from this cold life. Used to sell coke on the strip, but now I hold mics and plan soon to pack and vacate somewhere in Cancun. Escape to a cozy estate filled with mad rooms, furnished up. Too many foul niggas, time to turn it up. Push about a buck and shift gears, burn the clutch, cause it's like this. For these chips I strike swift, preciseness, precious jewels of life that's priceless. I paid my dues and through it all I never trade my shoes. Cash rules, new crews who made the news. We all for paper, I guess greed is just a second nature. And these shots of Hinvock and weed escalate ya. Some more they touch along the line crossed up. I took the shortcut, puffing on blunts, busting off nuts, the night type. Love dime bitches in nightlife, casino dice, sexy strip dancers in white ice. I seen the movie, most of you niggas couldn't move me. Truly it's like a 6-shot Ruger against a Uzi. So rush and run, or cock back, bust your gun, but I fake none. I remain like the sun, blessed with strong living, intellect and long vision, connects in prison, and real niggas with recognition. So respect the mission. Volume 1, 2nd edition, the next dimension. Dotted line, sign your deposition.
All right, we're back. We are about to go deep. Hope you like that music. I hope that gave you enough time to smoke the blunt. Tell your girl, sit the fuck down. I'm yawning like a bitch. I got up at like 4 a.m. today. Just so I can do these podcasts for you guys. Didn't you? Can't you see the dedication? Yay. All right, let's get into it. This podcast, lately my podcast been kind of on a little journey, on a journey of discovery. A lot of times, sometimes it be self-discovery, sometimes it be, environmental discovery. sometimes it be just cultural discovery. And I think that's what I've been on for a while. And I probably just made up that word, cultural discovery, or that phrase. But that's what we do here on Go Deep. So, what was I talking about? So I've been kind of on this path, and I've been trying to, for a while, I've been trying to find out what the fuck is this movement? What the fuck is this movement? What's going on around here? I've been trying to find that out, and I've been seeing this movement shows a lot through symbolism, and you can kind of see who is who just by looking at their symbolism that they kind of put out there. Like I said earlier, my friend Will is a Mason, but I already knew that because of the symbolism he uses a lot. But sometimes you can tell who's who also from the agendas they push, because these agendas aren't new. These agendas have been going on for a long time, you know? And then when we get them, we think, oh, the like LGBT and free sex movement is new, right? And all this, you know, all this shit going on these days in 2021. It's been going on. We've been hit with it pretty hard since summer 16. And Obama brought it, and Obama brought change. And that's what he said he was going to do. And he did it. But, you know, we didn't know what kind of change he was going to bring. He was pretty much like a cool dude. And he was a black dude. And, you know, we thought, oh shit, we about to get some cool, hip, urban shit if we just allow his change. But it's what a lot of the times what be going on is psychological warfare, and we don't know. We're under like mind control spells. These mind control spells have been happening they've been happening forever. And I'm gonna put that in this show also, but while I'm talking, I'm gonna focus on the movement more. These mind control spells have been going on forever, so of course they know how to do them. Now, there was this group of people named the Nazis, and they were more than just political. They were more than a political movement, even though they were in politics as well. But they were mainly a mystical movement. It was basically like if the American government, with all of its tanks and weapons and military and shit like that, if the American government starts worshiping the occult. But sometimes they do. But they do that privately, you know. America is supposed to be... this little cat getting on my nerves. He keeps making noise. But he's about to go outside. He's annoying. So, what was I talking about? The Nazi movement was studying all this ancient magic and shit. And they were studying how it affects the human body, the human brain more so. And they got good with it. And they've been controlling people's minds. And they've been practicing. And we saw it in, you know, even in our little universe. They've showed it a little bit in the Wonder Woman movie, the first one. You know, they were doing human test subjects and shit like that. And, but the test subjects were like gas. They were testing them out on gas. But, you know, the German military was testing more than just gas. You know, so there's tests called MK Ultra. And it has a bunch of branches. It has a whole lot of branches. And MK supposedly stands for mind control or something like that. But MK Ultra came to America, which everyone knows, because America is the one that got the Nazi scientists after World War II. But, you know, as we grow, we've learned that the Nazi scientists never really stopped being Nazi scientists. We learned they kept doing that shit. Now, we heard a bunch of shit like, Tuskegee experiments on black people and all kind of shit like that. But that's like, we think that's like some small compartmentalized thing from the South, but maybe we've all been test subjects all the time. All of us. Maybe that's what the whole fucking country is. Can you rise above lab rat? And that's pretty much what it is. That's what America is. When you're down on the fucking on the bottom, you're pretty much a lab rat. And you're not, I'm not saying on the bottom like in life, but kinda. Yeah, like the streets, the hierarchy, the fucking, if you're living day by day in America and you're struggling and you're like on your last rope, you're probably a test subject to a lot of different scientific experiments. And not just if you're down at the bottom living day by day in the streets and shit. The next level, you're a test subject for the pharmaceutical companies. Middle America, you think you made it out of, oh, I'm smart, I'm this, I'm that. No, you're a test subject for pharmaceuticals. And you're going to die at 90 and you're going to be another statistic to the insurance companies. And they're going to, do the same shit that they did with the last 100,000 people that they worked on that month. It's ran like that. But all of these tests had to go on. All of these human experiments, I wouldn't say had to go on, but they went on because, the earth got a lot of people. So the people who want to control everyone wants to do it not to a point where they gotta fucking be like Hitler and shit and come, show me your papers type control, which we are pretty close to that now with this fucking COVID shit. But I'm talking about control where they control your brain. They don't have to fucking beat you down and be in the streets and, they don't have to use force, but they can control your brain. So everyone, in this movement, listening, we are probably also test subjects, guys. I hate to say it like that, but we probably are also test subjects. Why? Because it's been going on since the beginning of time. Why else? Because we're fucking huge. There's a lot of people to fucking experiment with. A lot of people in this movement to experiment with. A lot of people that have mental issues. A lot of people that have been in some dark places. I've interviewed them. There's been a lot of people that got a story to tell, And I know I used to try to interview everybody, but I can't talk to hundreds of thousands of people in the Snyder Cut movement. So I got to just talk to y'all like this so you can kind of work through it yourself. So now what I'm getting at is, if we are experimented on, maybe there's some cult little aspects of this shit. Nah, I always shout out the Watchmen. Everybody know about the Watchmen. I think everybody knows about the Watchmen by now. It's not a little secret society anymore. No homo, we came out. So the Watchmen, right? When you go in the Watchmen chat, we used to be like a fucking AA meeting, kinda. Like a recovery room, a recovery chat room, because we probably went through some cult shit. We did. We went through a lot of that shit. There is, we think there's a cult aspect with TPZ and everyone that follows them and listens to them. And since Zack Snyder has, embodied them with Zack Crack and shit. Because when you need a cult, you need three things. You need fucking a charismatic leader. We got that. You need thought reform. Thought reform is basically change of thought. Like everybody say, oh, DC sucks. The Snyder Cut sucks. We reformed that. We changed it. So we got that. Now all we needed was fucking a violent act. Or a, extreme act. That's when you're in a cult. That's your 3 signs that there's a cult. Now we were close. That shit with Abdul and Vinaldo. If Vinaldo would have pushed it to the limit and maybe committed suicide, how would that have looked on this movement? It would have been a cult. You know, we would have been looked at as a cult. We would have had the 3 fucking calling cards of a cult. Now we're fucking the Watchmen. When we talk about this shit, we trip. We like, yeah, it is a cult. There is definitely a cult aspect to this movement, and we're like teetering on that shit. But if we, like, the more TPZ get empowered, the more we understand what it is. Because I remember TPZ, when they tried to grab me into their crew, they was talking some Lucifer shit. They was talking some Luciferian shit. So then when you look at it really, and you know that Luciferian shit is just some secret society shit, you know, they try to mask it into all of this like devil worship shit, but it's really like secret society shit. And the secret society is really just the occult, you know? So then when you look at it, and the secret societies has been studying this mysticism forever. When they study it, they experiment with it. They experiment on us. And when they experiment on us, they track the shit down. They record it. They keep the data. What have I been saying about data? We've been recording it. Twitter has been keeping it. Warner Brothers has been putting it in its vault and making money off of it, I'm sure. And do they have test subjects? Did a fucking light bulb just flash on y'all's head? Did it happen? Maybe. Do they have test subjects? Yeah, they have a lot of test subjects. Are some of them mentally unstable? Yes, a lot of them are mentally unstable. Do they have 24/7 access to these test subjects? Yes, they do. Do they have 24/7 data control over these test subjects? Yes, they do. How? With a movie that we all wanted to see, they leave it like a carrot, they pull it, we chase it, they make money off the chase, and the test subjects with the mental issues never really know what hit them. Never know what happened. Why? Because we don't study history. We don't know that this shit always happens. But, there's this one show. There's a show named Go Deep. That when it's all said and done, years from now, they're going to look at this one show like, God damn, I did not know dude said all of that shit. And that's the point. You're not supposed to know right now. Supposed to a little later, you know. You got to get it yourself, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I've noticed you got to get it yourself. People always tell me, you know, when I was growing up, always told me what to do. I was hard-headed. I never did it. So I'm kind of telling y'all what to do and what to look at and what to research. Some of y'all might be hard-headed. Some of y'all might not do it. But later on, it will still be here for you. I'm still going to be here because I put the shit on the internet. It's not going nowhere. So now I'm going to put some white people in here to bolster this claim. And you're going to start second guessing what's going on around here. What the fuck is happening with these corporations? And are these corporations connected to ancient societies? Are these ancient societies connected to quasi-political military factions? Are these quasi-political military occult factions connected to America? Maybe did they move out in Southern California and start this little thing called Hollywood so they can further control minds of people? And maybe did we run out like little fucking test lab rats and, oh, we love Hollywood. Please test on my brain. Yes, we did do that. So if you want to release from this bullshit you're in, you can take the Go Deep seminar, 4 easy payments of $49.99. and I will help you release this shit. After your 4 easy payments is up, you will join this crew named the Watchmen. Not only will we help you get it out, pause, no homo, but we will protect you on your journey because nobody can fuck with us. So let's just end this shit right now because I'm getting a little ahead of myself. White people into the room. Yeah, bitch.
Getting lots of people asking about the occult, cults, Satanism, SRA, and I've been watching David Whitehead's channel. He has got endless videos on cults, really esoteric stuff too, that's just been absolutely mind-blowing. I was watching one on this French cult, I think it was today, but we'll get to that. So many hours and hours of content. I don't know how we're going to condense it all down, but thank you for coming on, David.
Thank you, Sean. You're doing great work, man, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk about this with you.
I've got a link to your YouTube channel in the description box below the video so people can go down there, watch your stuff, and subscribe. Do you want to tell people how you came about to be researching that subject and your background, please?
Sure. I guess in a nutshell, I'm I'm a pretty normal guy. I'm a father of two. I'm an entrepreneur. I run a martial arts, fitness, and health business with my wife. And I've also been researching these very weird and bizarre things since as far back as I can imagine. I've always had an insatiable drive to find out what the heck is going on this crazy planet we live on. And it was just something that it was a passion, it was a hobby, it was an interest that I had. And then it turned into somewhat of a career of being an independent investigative journalist into these very, very mysterious and sometimes rather dark subject matters. So it's something that I started out on my YouTube channel. I used to do interviews with various authors that would inspire me, that I was curious about. And then I started making small films, started doing events, started even getting all the way up to History Channel and doing television documentaries and things like that. But I realized that when you get onto a big media platform, they condense everything down into like little 10 to 30-second bites. And so I really started to focus my energy on producing the content that I wanted to, and that's why it's long form. The series you're mentioning I called it Cults of Death and Power. It's a 4-part series with more parts coming. Each one is 3 to 4 hours long, and that's only scratching the surface. So I'm just a person who's curious about finding out the truth, man.
What is your definition of a cult?
I would say I look at it in a negative sense. I separate it from something like community. A cult would be something that has a hierarchical structure where you have probably a very charismatic figure or figures that are leading people literally by the nose in a way where each individual that's a part of not working with their critical apparatus of thought. They're becoming assimilated into an idea. So a cult starts with an idea. It starts with a concept that's shared by a charismatic leader. And then people go to it because all of us are seeking truth. All of us are seeking connection and enlightenment and knowledge. And so we can get drawn into these things. And there, unfortunately, are many people out there who I feel are rather twisted inside of themselves. And they go and they use their charisma, they use their knowledge and understanding of certain things to manipulate people to their will. And so I personally define cult as something that's rather negative because it takes away the personal responsibility and logical, critical thinking apparatus from the individual.
What are the common characteristics of cults that you have come across, and what are the most bizarre characteristics?
There are many characteristics. I would say the number one thing is fear of reprisal from the other cult members. So, for example, if someone's in a process of trying to learn about a certain subject, typically it's easier for them to get a better understanding when they're left to their own devices. They can question, they can challenge authority. If some leader or some teacher, say you're in a yoga studio or something, and the yoga teacher starts doing something rather bizarre, you as an individual can go, oh, okay, that's not for me, I'm going to leave. But in the cult, it's created like a family unit, and you can't rebel against the cult. You can't go against the edicts of the cult because, of course, all of those edicts and all those guidelines are all there for your best interest and the best interest of everybody else involved in the cult. So if you decide to step away and go, you know what, I'm going to think for myself, then there's immediate reprisal and ostracization, which all of us as human beings fear. So that's sort of the basic premise, is that it's a collective sort of hive. And there's nothing wrong with getting together with other people that have common ideas and a common way of thinking. The problem is when it gets to a level of crowd mob mentality, which if you read people like Gustave Le Bon, The Crowd, and many other who've analyzed crowd psychology, you'll realize that crowds are incapable of thinking rationally and critically. And so when you get into the bizarre elements, they stem from that. They stem from us as individuals giving our minds over to some leader, some guru, if you think of people like the Heaven's Gate cult or Jim Jones or any of these other cults we can talk about, people, it's their goodness, it's their virtues that are preyed upon, and people come with good intentions and they just want to get together with other people, but then it slowly starts to degrade as the influence of the cult leader becomes more nefarious, and it can actually lead to mass suicides. It can lead to incredibly bizarre rituals. And I think a lot of this originates in the ancient times. And that's an element that I think when you read a lot of modern cult researchers and cult books, that I feel like that chapter of the book is often missing. We often just look at, there's a bunch of cults in California or whatever. But there's cults all over the world. They've been with us since the beginning of humanity, and they're documented all the way back as far as ancient Egypt and possibly even before. So when you get into the ancient rites and rituals of some of these cults, it gets truly bizarre, my friend. We can talk about some of those as we go.
I like to say that esoteric yoga practices sounds right up my street. I really enjoy my yoga. So what cult has fascinated you the most and why?
That's a good question. I think there are some cults that are very interesting. My first answer would be, I was mostly interested not just in the cult leaders or the specific cults. I was interested originally with this project with why do people get involved with these things? Why do people, how do you turn what you would call a normal person, a neighbor up the into someone that's willing to drink Kool-Aid, into someone that's willing to be a part of mass satanic rituals, or to get involved with really bizarre things that they would never otherwise get involved with. So I was always curious of what is it in us that is that element where we're willing to give up our own individual mind to whoever we're trusting in, putting all our trust into. Why are we willing to do that? And why do we get to a point where whole nations are turned into these sort of cults, where you go back into these different political regimes that have risen up in China or Germany or Russia and Cambodia, all these places. And so that was my premise. But then as I got in, I can think of cults that were really interesting, like the Process Church of the Final Judgment, run by people like Robert de Grimston. There was also the, some of the solar cults that were linked to a lot of the Knights Templar rituals. There was these Templar cults that actually started doing these rituals where they were killing their flock in these suicide rituals. They were in Montreal, they were in the UK, there was little branches here or there. And what I was interested about that cult was that it was surrounded by the entire Masonic Templar symbolism and narrative. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because there are ancient cults that you could track in secret societies and fraternities and things like that to those types of groups. It's interesting that we've actually had these little outcrops of variations of these groups that have turned into these cults that end up, committing suicide or convincing their members to commit suicide, or actually convincing people to go out and, commit murder and things like that. So that also Heaven's Gate, that one is a mind trip for sure. I watched hours of footage of many of the different members of Heaven's Gate as they were, with a smile talking about how excited they were to go to the 9th dimension above human, the level above human. We're all going to ascend. And in order to ascend, we have to shake off this husk, this body. The body doesn't really exist, and life is just an illusion. And you listen to these people for long enough, and you're like, there's some interesting points there, but something's not really clicking, because now you're about to go and end your physical life. And so that whole process was very interesting for me. Jim Jones is interesting. Man, you asked for one. Every single one of them is unique and has the elements in them that are very, very interesting and bizarre indeed.
Could you go over the characteristics of the leaders of each of those cults, their backstories?
Well, each one of these cults, if you think about someone like Jim Jones, he started out as a reverend. You know, he was someone who became a symbol, who was very attractive to people because he was trying to unify the whites and the blacks in his community in the church, and he was trying to bring different denominations of Christianity together and he's basically trying to reform. And I feel like that happens a lot. These reformers, these prophets, these people that are trying to change things. And there are legitimate people in the world and in history that have gone on that track and didn't end up causing mass suicides or mass damage. But it's that characteristic that people are attracted to, which is charismatic leader. You know, someone like Jim Jones comes from a Christian sort of veneer. So a lot of people in that time in America could have identified with it. He came in at a time where there was a lot of division, a lot of racial tension in America. So he became a symbol of unity and all of these things. When you think of Applewhite and, you know, Bonnie Nettles with the Heaven's Gate cult, I think Applewhite, it was his wife that passed away, and he had another cult that he started prior to, but then he started the Heaven's Gate, and then his wife had passed away, and I think what he ended up doing was taking out his anger and his rage at that and his depression at that. He kind of took it out within the confines of the cult, as well as all the other bizarre things that he was into. So you can, there's people who've written entire books on psychological profiles of these people, but I would say, you know, narcissism is a huge factor. We're dealing here with people who, you know, some people would say, oh, they're psychopathic or they're sociopathic. They debate exactly what the psychological profile might be. But I did a piece that was interesting in one of the episodes where I was covering one of the researchers, one of the journalists, or I believe he was a detective who was looking into some of these, you know, serial killers and cults. And he did psychological profiles on them. And he was like, oh, yeah, it looks like they're psychopathic because these parts of the brain aren't you know, it's an overly developed prefrontal cortex. And there's all these signs. But then he looked at his own psychological profile and he looked at his own brain scans and found that he had an identical pattern to a lot of these leaders. So he's sitting there going, well, wait a second, I'm not out there with, you know, I don't want to go murder people. I don't want to start a cult. So what's the difference? And I think maybe there's an element there of, there's sort of like it's like a religious type mindset that gets developed. And it comes out of the trauma of these people. You can see these people are highly traumatized themselves, which is why they are able to project themselves in such an overly magnified, you know, extroverted way, which is what attracts people to them. Because deep down, they want the attention. They want people to crowd around them and worship them and cry with them and love them. They're looking for that love that we're all looking for. It just comes out in a very negative way. And I think there's also a relationship between these cult leaders and the cult followers, and they kind of shape each other over time. And you can watch that process happen. So as much as we like to look at these different individuals and go, oh, evil bastard, let's get, you know, there's a relationship between the master and the slave that needs to be understood, I think, more deeply.
So I've got a lot of young people here in the UK that watch these videos, and perhaps they're not that familiar with Jim Jones. Could you explain how his cult was he transplanted over to, was it Central or South America, and what happened there?
Yeah, he created a little commune, basically. They call it Jonestown. And where was it again? My God, I've been looking at so many of the backgrounds. But yeah, I believe it was Central America. And he had basically this idea that we are being restricted by the government in our ability to practice our religion. We need to be free from the system, break away from the system. There were a lot of socialist and Marxist tones to him. Actually, he said many times outright, he's like, I am, you know, socialism incarnate. And, you know, we need to, you know, basically bring the world together into a big community. And it just appealed to so many people. So he convinced close to 1,000 people to move to this little commune. You know, parents, children, people brought sometimes up to 15 or 16 of their family members to this place. And they, you know, did what a lot of these different communes do. They try to become self-sufficient. Then it gets to a point where they need to protect themselves. So they start getting into arms, you know, getting military grade weapons for security purposes. Then it gets kind of orgiastic. Then it gets, you know, and it's you can see in the people's eyes when you look at Jonestown, and there are many documentaries on it and good reports on it, where everybody that's there, right up to the 24-hour period where they all drank the Kool-Aid, and they're all just, their eyes are shining. They're still madly in love with Jim Jones, even though he was putting loudspeakers up and doing propaganda every night. And there were many. He was doing sexual exploits with some of the younger women, and who knows what else, right? And there was all kinds of things that people started to see signs of. Some people wanted to leave. I believe some people left. But the vast majority of people turned a blind eye to any of those things, and they stuck with it right to the end, to the point where they were willing to not only drink the Kool-Aid themselves, but give the Kool-Aid to their children and literally watch them die. And that, to me, is one of the most horrifying things to see. And I think that story is, as gruesome as it is, as hard to watch as it is, it's a really good lesson for us. And I think that's why I wanted to do this series, was to look at all these different cults and analyze, why would people do that? What would drive people to do that? And I guess that's why you have to get into human psychology, mass psychology, and have a better understanding of that to really, really grasp it.
How did Jim Jones himself die?
He ended up basically drinking the Kool-Aid himself, if I remember correctly. And there was an audio clip, which is really brutal to listen to. I only played a clip of it in my presentation, where he's basically, as people are drinking the Kool-Aid, he's trying to calm them down and soothe them. He's like, it's okay, it's just death. It's just a transition. We're just transitioning from the body. There'll be no more pain. And people are literally screaming in the background, and it's just horrifying. You can only imagine. And he's just sitting there trying to coax them into it. He's like, I'm going to wait till every one of you go, and then, I'm going to follow you into the paradise. And it's just, I can't even imagine what that kind of situation must have been like. And there was even a senator that went up to try to interview him and try to get a scope on what was going on. And there's a famous scene where he's standing in front of the crowd. This is, again, 24 hours before they do this deed. And he asks everybody, you seem really happy to be here. And the sound that you hear in that room of just joy, just sheer, like, rah, it almost reminds you of watching some of the rallies, with Hitler and all these kinds of things, where people are just fully dedicated and fully in that frequency, and then this senator was actually shot. There was another reporter who was a congresswoman, I believe, who was also shot multiple times. She survived, went on to write a book, tell her story of how that situation unfolded. But yeah, not only was that situation set up where they were all drinking the Kool-Aid and Jim Jones is on the mic, making sure everybody's committing to it, but anybody that tried to flee, because people did try to flee, they were surrounded by armed guards, and they were actually, there were people getting shot and herded back into they were corralled back into the stadium to basically finish off what they'd started. So there's an element of, you can see there's an element of the coaxing and the massaging of the mind and all of that. And then it gets to a point of force. Like, we're doing this. There's no way out. There's literally no way out. And I think that there's so many examples of things getting to that level, that these stories are a warning to us all.
Do you know approximately how many people died in the Jim Jones cult?
It was just under 1,000. Just under 1,000. Yeah, I think it was 980 something. So very close to 1,000 people. You can only imagine.
What was the fate of Heaven's Gate?
So Heaven's Gate was a smaller operation. It was something that went on for, I believe, 20 or 30 years. It's actually still in existence, by the way. You can still go to the Heaven's Gate website. I even sent an email to them, just to see if they'd interview. They weren't super keen about that. But basically it was the idea that this was during the time of Hale-Bopp's comet. And what they set up with Heaven's Gate was they had, I'm trying to remember the exact numbers of people, but I believe it was around 20 people. And they got together, they had the same uniforms. They all prepared these specific badges that they had. The badge would say away team, because they literally believed that they were extraterrestrials that were here to give the world a divine message. And then they were going to do this ritual process of dissolving the body computer so that they could jump onto the tail of Hale-Bopp's comet and get to the 9th dimension above human. You watch Applewhite give his little speeches. They're creepy as hell. And he's just like, yeah, we're going to go to the 9th dimension above human. And it's going to be so good. And so it ends up, I actually got an opportunity to go to a place in LA called the Museum of Death, where they still have the actual the mixture of the poisons and things like that that they use for this pudding that they would eat. And then there was the Reebok shoes, the black gowns, the purple coverings, the beds that they all laid in and were found in by the FBI. And you just standing in that room, man, the creepy feeling that you get just being there, and then seeing the suicide notes. And the suicide notes are these, they're written with joy and excitement, and it's so dark, but you sit there and you look at it and you go, this is what happens when you give your mind over to a psychopath. And everybody can say, well, I'm sure those people meant well and they just wanted to find some kind of spirituality. I'm sure there's better ways. I'm sure there's better places you could go, because those kind of situations are, and unfortunately, a lot of people think, oh yeah, there was the Jim Jones, there was the Heaven's Gate, there was the Solar Temple, there was these things. There's countless examples. I could do episodes on it every week and we still wouldn't even get to the bottom of it. So that's just yet another example.
How did they kill themselves in Heaven's Gate?
They ate this poisonous concoction. I believe it was Clorox. They mixed some vodka and some other, I think, was it rat poison or another type of poison or cyanide? I'm trying to remember exactly here, but they mixed it all together. They ate it. They all lied down. They covered their faces with this big purple cloth, and then they were all found, in the same place. So it was a mass ritual, and that's how they were told to do it, because they had to go as a team. They were getting literally beamed up, just like Star Trek. And so you got to be in this special place on this special date, and we all got to go together. So the away team, incredible.
So it seems a common theme here is that death is going to transport them to some form of paradise. Is that the case? Did you say Solar? There was something called Solar?
Yeah, there's the Solar Temple. That's the one that has the connections to the Templars. This is one where they would actually have these banquets, and they would do like a Last Supper. So it was very akin to something you'd see in a church ceremony, because it was the Templar vibe, right? And they would wear the Templar symbolism. They would do the wine and the bread and all of that. And the food would have been poisoned, or some people would say they would shoot them, or they would burn a place down. That one was interesting because there were multiple ways that they would kill people. And this was all consensual. This is written down as most of them were consensual. We don't know in the end. But again, to see that this cult catches on, it starts to spread and then form even branches around different parts of the world. And then they all kill themselves on a particular date that has to do with an astrological alignment or something like that.
So some cults end with battles with the authorities, and there are many angles to the David Koresh story. What is your perspective?
Well, David Koresh, again, he came from that sort of Christian Baptist, kind of a vibe, but with a twist. And it was easy for him to lead people into that idea. And his thing was, again, the state is evil. We have to formulate our own church, our own community. And maybe a lot of people even resonate with that because they do see the authorities cracking down on churches, or, all these different abuses that are documented. So people go, yeah, you're right, Koresh, you're right. We got to do our own thing, and we got to arm ourselves and protect our turf. And it becomes almost like a little gang type mentality. And then, of course, when it gets down to the point where they're shooting it out with the FBI and the police and the sheriffs or whatever, you get to a point where Koresh would be someone that just says, well, we're all going to go out swinging then, and we'll just burn the whole thing down, kill everybody involved, and we'd rather die than acquiesce to your will. And so, everybody has their take on that story. There's a really popular Netflix documentary series about it right now. But yeah, another charismatic preacher that led people one way or another to their deaths.
Do you think the government had a role in their deaths?
There is that idea that, the government came in and they were responsible for it. But, government is another cult that we could talk about. But I don't know for sure. I just think that in the end, it's probably there was a handshake there. It was a combination of things, people going willingly into this occult ideology, and then the FBI and the state going, we won't tolerate this, so we'd rather you we'll fight it out with you. And if we have to break a few eggs, then it's acceptable collateral damage.
So one of my favorite stories on Netflix is Wild Wild Country, where the Rajneesh just start showing up in orange. Have you watched it?
Mm. It's a really great series, really great series. I mean, there's definitely missing pieces to the story, I think, but you can't cover everything in one series. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I really admire a lot of the writings of Osho, because this is all centered around Osho, right? He comes this mystic from India, and he's one of the gurus. And when you read his books, you're like, wow, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. And there's a lot that I would say, hey, I don't really disagree with that. He's arguing for freedom, independence of each independence of each individual. So it's funny, he's preaching against the dynamics of getting into a cult, yet he ends up being a part of this cult. And then there's the woman that's sort of behind it. I'm trying to remember her name now, but she ends up being sort of like the manager of it, and starts to take really drastic measures. And so some people look at it and they blame Osho, and some people blame her. And some people also think that the whole thing was financed from, some very interesting places, some secret societies or something, or that it was some kind of a controlled experiment in league with the CIA. There's a few conspiracy theories about it. But either way, again, you have that same tale of people. The interesting thing about cults is they go for uniformity. So everybody this is what you're saying with these red gowns. There's uniformity. There's this idea of freedom when you're in the cult. So when you're in the cult, you're free. When you leave the cult, now you're a slave to the system, right? So the cult becomes this safe haven for people, and it starts to attract people from all over the world. And remember, during that time, there was a lot of moving away from the church in America. A lot of people were, kind of had enough with it. So they were seeking other forms of enlightenment and religion. And so it seems like at that time, there was a lot of cults springing up because the door was open. Now all the other ideas can come in from all over the world and start to influence people in America. And I think, they're led like moth to the flame. This is something new, exciting, and I feel so free. But then, you got to watch out who you trust.
Something just dawned on me then when you said about the writings of Osho. Is it common that cults perhaps recycle ancient wisdom and then attach other stuff to it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And remember that a lot of the ideas of sacrifice, sacrificing the virgin, the idea that, all of that stuff, the ritual components, the esoteric components, the occult components, those come from the ancient world just as much as the wisdom of the ancients, I think a lot of us like to look back at ancient times and ancient Egypt and Rome and Greece and Babylon and Sumeria, and we go, wow, the incredible structures and the beautiful wisdom and knowledge. And of course that did exist. But then you get into the details of it and you go, oh, there's also a really dark rabbit hole to go down with a lot of those different, the temples and the ceremonies and the priest crafts and the way that the different blood rituals. When you look at modern Satanism, it's basically just a husk of what it used to be. The old school Atonists and the old school cult of Dionysus and the cult of the solar, what they call the cult of the black sun. This is where you got the Fool Society in Germany. They got their ideas from the ancient occult schools. And that's the interesting thing about that body of knowledge is like if you look at Masonry or you look at stuff coming out of Templarism or Christianity or any of the religions, it's not necessarily that the information and the knowledge itself is evil. It's just that it's information that when given to a certain psychology with whoever, if you basically, they used to say, if you haven't been purified as a spiritual being, you can't even handle this knowledge. That was the old thing, right? And they would often use that as like a lure, like, oh, if you come here, we'll give you the hidden knowledge that you've been missing. And so people are like, oh, I want the hidden knowledge, but a lot of people don't get all of it, and so they get little chopped up pieces of it that have been edited so that it accesses their mind in a very specific way, and then it leads them the wrong direction. So it becomes a bastardized, confused version of it, basically. So yeah, the ancient times is where you got to look. I even went back and was taking a relook at Göbekli Tepe, which is this ancient structure and city in Turkey. And a lot of people that I know of that come from sort of the alternative community or the New Age community would love to look at that temple as this beautiful place that was built. It's like the Garden of Eden. They used to call it the gate to the Garden of Eden. And I found that there's actually an ancient skull cult that has recently been documented in that vicinity, where they used to sacrifice children. And there's skulls that have been found there of children, of adults they didn't die in some accident, they didn't die in some battle. There were precision cuts, ritualistic type cuts, and all these kinds of things that were found. So it just kind of reminds you that this mixed bag of beautiful, enlightening knowledge from the ancient world must also be contrasted with the fact that there's a lot of dark, evil stuff also coming out of there as well. So the average person, are they equipped to be able to differentiate between the two? This is the question that I've been trying to peer into and find out, have any of those ancient cults really gone away? Or are they still in operation in the world? And do they actually go all the way up to the elite levels of the world? And are there members of these cults that are still, in positions of power today that we're not even aware of? We look at, there's the royal family, there's these media representatives, there's these celebrities, and you start to wonder, well, why are we seeing all of these traces of these ancient rituals and stuff from the stuff I'm talking about in music videos, in movies, in storylines for television shows? Why are the symbols that are encoded in these different structures and orders being worn by these celebrities and on the logos of t-shirts and on the logos of all these different ad copies and things like that? So then I start to ask, wow, I don't think those ancient cults went away. I think they just upgraded, they morph, they change, and people are just as susceptible to them today as they were in ancient times.
In terms of human sacrifice then, in Hollywood, it's often portrayed that the ancients would sacrifice someone to get a better crop. If the crops had been down, the weather had been poor. Is that the case, or is that just a Hollywood version of things?
Oh, no doubt that probably went on. I mean, you can even read stories about it in the Bible or ancient texts about the idea that, you sacrifice the virgin in order to provoke the gods or provoke the weather that you want for the crops. There's definitely that idea, but there's also other reasons for these types of sacrifices as well, especially when you start getting into a very dark rabbit hole, which is the sacrifice of children. This is something that probably one of the most uncomfortable subjects to talk about. It's definitely one of the most uncomfortable subjects that I had to research, being that I am a father, and you can't even imagine somebody that would have the ability to do that to a child. But sad to report, this is something that exists in this world today. There are people that I know that could take you to places that there's still these types of operations happening, especially when you start getting into, let's just call it Hollywood. And you realize that, there are other reasons for this. A lot of people feel that the reason they do it specifically with children is because of the adrenaline release that is, the adrenaline that's released into the blood. And then when they take that blood and they consume the blood or mix it with other potions and DMT, whatever, different drugs and opiates and things like that, that it actually gives, they call it the elixir of life. So it's literally vampirism. And there's even in the first Sherlock Holmes that was done with Robert Downey Jr., it opens up with a scene of this mass ritual setup. And you'll see this a lot in movies, the dark side, the ritualistic side. There's elements of this in Lord of the Rings. There's elements of this in a lot of our mythos and our movies. And yet when you try to tell people, hey, go listen to Ted Gunderson, who was FBI director for so long, and he went out and actually was the one cleaning up the leftovers and the remains of these shattered bodies from these satanic rituals. People didn't believe him in his day, but he's being vindicated every day. We keep looking at the news today with the Epsteins and all that kind of stuff. People like Ted Gunderson, Maury Terry, and others are being vindicated of this.
Yeah, I've listened to Ted on YouTube. Fascinating stuff. How prevalent is modern day Satanism then in its worst form? Human sacrifice. Is it networks of people, or is it just isolated pockets?
Well, in terms of the whole satanic network. The vast majority of satanic temples, your buddy that says, "Oh, I'm a Satanist," a lot of that's just lower level. It's people. It's like the punk movement or something. Like they're just rebels. They believe in anarchy, and they sometimes go to a big bonfire and whatever, do some chants or whatever. But then there's the elite level, and I would say that that's obviously not as prevalent, because there's not as many of these people on the planet as there are, I think, well-meaning people that wouldn't want to get involved with this kind of stuff. So I think it's not necessarily, you could say, oh, all Satanists are involved in these kinds of things. I think that's overgeneralizing the subject. I think what you really realize is there's a core group, and that core group has their beliefs rooted in these very ancient Setian, Luciferian type ideologies that are they're not simple, they're very complex, they're not stupid, they're very advanced. I was even reading quotes from people like David Berkowitz. That's a book to read. I mean, this is a book that he wrote when he was in prison, of the fact that he was ritually abused as a child. This is something that they do to bring people into the cult at a young age so that they can program them. So trauma is a programming device. And so you traumatize a child at the young age, and then you can mold them any way you wish. There was that old quote from the Jesuits that said, give me a child to the age of 7 and I'll make the man. And so Berkowitz was echoing, he's saying, I was made by these people. I was made through trauma, and they're not your average hillbillies. They're not these people that have low IQs. These Satanists that I'm talking about are doctors, lawyers, politicians, businessmen, elite people, and they're very sophisticated, they're very intelligent, and they have a vast network. So I would just say, all right, well, let's take what David Berkowitz admitted in prison and see if it pans out. And when you do the research, indeed it does pan out.
Could you just explain to people who David Berkowitz is, please?
He is a Son of Sam killer. So you can go look into that story, and he's somebody who was a serial killer, who did ritualistic type killings, and he then came out and started exposing the entire satanic network that was behind him.
So there is a video that's got about 4 or 5 million views on Vice. It's called Modern Day Satanism, and it focuses on Eric Freeman and the House of Wills. I just interviewed Eric a couple of days ago. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not, actually.
Well, he struck me more along the lines of the punk rocker guy you just described. So I'll go over to the next question then. Now, Charles Manson. Do you think Manson was a CIA LSD experiment gone wrong, or do you have another perspective?
Well, I wouldn't put past anything with the CIA, because I have a book from a former CIA intelligence officer. It was released, I believe, in the 70s, where they actually call it CIA, the Cult of Intelligence. And he actually exposes the fact that within the CIA is embedded this cult. So not everybody in the CIA, but there's a cult that is working within these intelligence communities. And so, you could say, well, there's probably a connection there. But I think there's a more interesting connection with the Manson murders and the Process Church of the Final Judgment, Robert de Grimston, and some of these people. So this would be like, so you have a cult that is a little bit more secret, but is made up of far more powerful type individuals. They have more money, they have more influence, they have more connections. They're a lot smarter, right? And then they look for recruitment. Maybe they need hitmen, maybe they need access to the drug cartels and the drug routes, maybe the human trafficking. So then they look for these little agents that they can use for different purposes. So I would look at a good connection between Robert de Grimston. There's actually Maury Terry. That's the book. He's one of the journalists that exposed the whole thing. And he talks about the connections between Manson, how Manson was groomed by this cult, and possibly maybe the CIA, you get into some of that as well, but that this was allowed to happen, and that what Manson was doing by grooming these young women and these people to go out and start taking out celebrities was that those were hits that were put on by these bigger cults. And the media made it look like, oh, Manson, he's just this lone psychopath that mind controlled a bunch of young girls into killing celebrities for him. But there's a bigger story behind it. And the name of that book, I can send you the link. It's by Maury Terry, and there's been other authors that have written about it as well. Yeah, I'll have to try to pull it up, but it's a great read, and it just goes into the entire story of the moment he tried to peer behind the curtain on the Process Church and a few other actors involved. That's when all of a sudden he starts getting weird phone calls. He starts getting death threats. He starts running into all kinds of problems. His work starts getting attacked publicly. So he started to uncover the fact that, hey, when I'm doing my job as a journalist, trying to report this very interesting twist to the Manson killing or any other cult, all of a sudden, very powerful people are blocking me, and now my books are being attacked and suppressed. My editors are telling me they can't write for me anymore. I'm getting death threats. I'm getting weird phone calls. I'm having people follow me. And he just tells his story about what it's like to be a journalist trying to pursue the truth, investigating these very deep, dark cults. So he just kind of hinted at the fact that it's not just some low-level criminality going on here. There's something that's highly organized. There's a hierarchical structure. What we see happening in the television media world and the sort of the external world of things is really just the result of things that are happening behind the shadows. So hidden shadows, they're everywhere, man.
Is it another commonality that cults use drugs to capture people's minds?
Absolutely. Yeah, drugs. It's drugs and light. So they use the light. They're like, follow the light, come to the light. And I think when we think of that term enlightenment, we often think that immediately equates to knowledge and understanding and, this deep wisdom. But light has many properties, and light can also be used to blind as well as to reveal, right? And so you look at the symbolism in a lot of these cults, like I'm saying, the Solar Temple, the Process Church. They're using crosses. They're using iron crosses, which is a symbol for the sun and the equinox and what's happening up in the sky. There's a lot of astrological tie-ins to their symbolism, and so they're using light to lead you somewhere. And what we call it is it's the false light. It's obviously it's something that is just used as a lure. And so light and then the drugs are where they're saying, well, hey, on your own brain and your own body can't possibly connect to the truth and to the divine message. So, these are going to be doorways. These are going to help open up doorways. So here's the psilocybin, here's the DMT, here's the ayahuasca, here's the more hardcore types of mixtures of drugs and concoctions, like some of the stuff they experimented with, things like MK Ultra and the CIA and other things like that. And that was another connection I made. I went, okay, here are these cults using drugs, using these different, these properties of light and hypnotism and all that. And then here's the CIA doing projects like MK Ultra and other things that are using the same thing: drugs, repetitive imagery, using flashing lights, using isolation, using all kinds of things to try to get the human mind into a different mode so that they can create alternate personas, and they're trying to open up compartments in the brain. And so you start to go, is there sort of a ball being passed between big intelligence agencies and maybe even some other organizations and these cults that everybody talks about? Is there a shared knowledge that people are seeking as to how to control and manipulate human behavior? Then you get into, the work people like Edward Bernays, and you get into the political side of things, and you see that, wow, a lot of these, why was Hitler and all his goons really interested in the occult? What was so powerful about that? Why was Idi Amin, the butcher of Africa, interested in witchcraft, voodoo, and the occult? Why was Mao Zedong and his gangs interested in the occult? A lot of people don't know, but for thousands of years, secret societies and different orders have run a lot of things behind the scenes in China, and we're very linked to the rise of people like Mao Zedong. And a lot of his messages came out of their books, just like, so you just start to see that this isn't just what we've been told. We've been given a very surface level, exoteric story, but there's an esoteric level, there's a subtextual level that shows that this is ancient, this is huge, this is interconnected, this is incredibly intelligent, this isn't just a bunch of Joe Schmoes. There's some very, very big money behind these types of operations and these types of things. And at the end of the day, the word that kept coming to my mind was just experiment. These are experiments. These are experiments to see whether they were set up by the experimenters or whether they're just looked at as, oh, look at that little cult over there. Interesting. Let's go take some notes. Let's go take some notes as to what's the right combination of drugs. What's the right combination of, the ideology, and what's the pathology that we can create in people. And somebody wants that information. They've had it for thousands of years because it's knowledge over the human race. And that's why I say to people, studying these dark subjects isn't something that should just immediately depress you and freak you out. It should give you a key to wisdom, to understanding how to combat that and develop immunity, being pulled into these different things, and to recognize that you don't need some cult leader or some cult in order to find spirituality or connect to the divine, the God, or whatever you want to call it. You can do that on your own. You have all the keys within you. And when there's nothing wrong with doing it with other people and having teachers and guides, but when it goes from teacher and guide to dictator, cult leader, weird stuff, then we have to have the ability to be able to see that and spot the contradictions and spot the lies and spot the deception.
Yeah, I recently interviewed Stephen Kinzer, who wrote Poisoner in Chief, which is the biography about Gottlieb and MK Ultra. Absolutely mind-blowing what the CIA got up to. So you're mentioning how there's a historical record of these cults going way back. What's the very first cult that you found to ever, leave any information that you could research?
You can really start with, I had a good little list here. You can start with, if you get into the cult of Set and the cult of Aten or Aton in ancient Egypt, then that's just a place to start. But it just gives you the idea that, okay, these ideas have been around for thousands of years. These religions have been around for thousands of years. The religions we see, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, whatever, Taoism, they're the public veneer. They're the public religions that have been approved for the masses. You start to realize that behind the lodge doors, behind the black lodges, behind the royal families, behind and I'm talking all over the world, going back, the pharaonic dynasties, the Caesars in Rome, you start to see that there's these different variations of those original cult ideas. So it's as if these ideas started somewhere and we never got rid of them. And they just sort of morph, change, and adapt based on the environment, the different culture that it's being used in. I mean, there's different cults in the Middle East as well. You can go back into, these hashish cults, the assassins, the thuggee, and some of these types of cults that are interesting that also use drugs and magic and ritual. And so, yeah, if you start in ancient Egypt, man, that's a lifetime of research right there. I mean, people have dedicated their lives to getting into what were the difference between the Omonists and the Atenists, and what were the difference between cults or religions that were there to uplift humanity and try to bring about prosperity and a connection to nature and to God, and what was the difference between those cults of power, And so I say cult of Set, cult of Set, cult of Aten, cult of Dionysus. Those are good starts, and then you can just keep tracking it through history, and you can see that this is where we get the birth of like Satanism and things like that. And also on my other project on Unslaved, we have a sort of a closed door podcast that we do for members only, where we really dive deep into these things. And we actually just did a whole thesis on Gnosticism. A lot of the differences between Gnosticism and Hermeticism, you can see between, say the cult of the Atenists and the cult of the Omonists coming out of Egypt. So it's a very interesting lineage. I'm not trying to say it's all cut and dry, but it's a good intro for people to get into, to see where are people like, the Jim Joneses, the Applewhite in Heaven's Gate, where are they getting their ideas from? And you start to trace it, and you can find a lot of those original ideas in the ancient world.
What's the difference between cults and modern religion?
I knew you were going to ask this one. This is an interesting question. I tried to answer this because, I even look at religion. Okay, so there's two different kinds of religion. There's actually two meanings of the word. One, you could look at like religare, the original term for religion, coming out of the Latin, which was basically to bind together, right? It's even the symbol of the fasciae with the axe head and the sticks tied around it. It's the same kind of concept where a religion is something that binds together. But you can look at it in a positive sense, where it's like, oh, religion is something that binds me to my culture, to my community. It connects me to God. It connects me to my faith, right? And so there could be like a benign religion, but then it can become cult-like when, again, even though they're still saying, oh, we're just a religion, but we're still, loaded with pedophilic priests, and we still do rites and rituals, and we still, engage in all kinds of criminal activity and fraud and these kinds of things. You start to go, okay, where did you go from being a force of enlightenment to being a force where you're tolerating incalculable evil, or you're now competing against other religions for supremacy? And that's when I start to say, well, maybe there is no difference between religion and cult. A religion is just another vein of the same principle of collectivizing people into this little Borg-like entity where you have no independent thought, you can't rebel against the edicts of the priests, you're not allowed to have a direct connection to the divine. You need to have these vicars. They call them the vicars in the Catholic Church, at least, which are the stand-ins. You are not intelligent enough, or you're too illiterate in order to understand the holy word. So you're going to need me, the vicar, the stand-in, to represent the divine for you and be that mediator for you. Okay, well, when you really follow that through, you start to realize, well, I'm not really having a connection to the divine or to any kind of spirituality. I'm having a connection with this person's interpretation of some ancient texts and rites and rituals, and I'm thinking that that's the real deal. So I guess when you get into the question of cults and religion, it's not black and white. I mean, there's what I believe to be a personal religion that you have where you're free. It's based on freedom. And then there's the cult-like religion, which is based on suppressing freedom, putting your mind into a box, and keeping you under control. So it gets a little bit interesting when you start dissecting all those features in that.
So if there's good and bad in religion and good and bad in cults, is it the degree that differentiates them?
The degree of, I would say, yeah, it would be the degree by which the individual that's getting pulled into that idea is giving up their mind to these ideologies. See, if you're pursuing truth and you want to connect to some form of spirituality, and maybe even you want to do it in a community setting, you want to name it, you want to have a team, you want to have a building, you want to have somewhere to go every Sunday or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're going there and everybody that's there is there to share and support the freedom of each individual, and also to not always challenge somebody that, or ostracize somebody that challenges an idea. I think of that's why I'm more of a student of philosophy, because philosophy and science, there's a method of looking at the truth where it's always subject to change. If new information comes, we're going to update our knowledge, and we're going to learn together, and we're going to go on a journey of discovery together. That's a whole heck of a lot different than the rules have already been written. You can't rebel against the edicts of the priests, and they are the direct communicators of God. And so if that person, it has to do with the followers of the cult at that point. So if so many people are gathering around these fake priests and these fake religious teachers, then that's why those cults survive. And we don't really get to see the real thing in the world as much as we would like to. And that's why I say all these cult leaders would be out of business if nobody signed up for the cult. So yeah, I guess it's to the degree which the individual is giving over their mind and not pursuing their own free inquiry to formulate a direct connection to spirituality, nature, or God.
When I was a kid, I was quite gripped by these programs about cult deprogrammers. Now, does that work, or is it just TV hype?
I'm sure there are TV hype personalities in cult deprogramming, but I do believe you can deprogram somebody from, if they've come out of a cult. I do believe you can assist. There's a lot of things you can do to assist. All you got to do is wake them up to their own intelligence, and wake them up to their own spiritual essence, and wake them up to their own potentiality. It was one thing I noticed, Sean, when I was watching the footage of the victims of Heaven's Gate, was that they all fit a very particular profile. A lot of these people, you could tell, were probably ostracized or outcasted from their communities. They were sort of the nerdy types, if you will. They were sort of, you could say they were very shy. They were very introverted. They were very easily led. There was one video where you see Applewhite standing up in front of this one guy, and he's saying, "Stand up, tell me your story, tell me who you are." And you just see the guy, he's like a little dog. I stand up now? You want me to talk? Okay, whatever you say. And there's just this deer in headlights look on all the people's faces. And you go, wow, this guy has really hypnotized everybody. Hypnosis can happen. You can hypnotize yourself, or you can be hypnotized by someone else. And so if you can be hypnotized and brought into believing something that's a lie or something that's inauthentic, then to me, it suits to say that you could reverse engineer that, and you can save people from that. You can bring them back. And this is why you got to get into people like Wilhelm Reich's work about the body, the somatic intelligence, waking that up. You get into some of the great psychologists that have done amazing work on trying to help people recover from abusive scenarios, helping people cover from, there's even people that have been trying to help those people who were in those MK Ultra mind control experiments to try to recover and find themselves again. And maybe there's damage that's irreversible, but you can definitely save a lot of your mind from that. And I believe that, you know, with the right combination of things, you could probably fully recover. So but there is hype. There's a lot of those fakers out there that are like, I've got the solution, pay me, you know, 50 grand and I'll bring you back to your normal self. And it turns out that they're spin doctors as well. So there's cults, and then there's the cult of people trying to save people from cults, and it's just an endless cycle.
Do you have any stories of people you may have spoken to who have recovered from cults?
Well, I just interviewed a guy on my channel. His name is Shane Bales, and people can take his story as, you know, as they wish or not. But he's somebody that I knew from Toronto who was actually raised in one of these cults, and it was one of those pretty high level bloodline type situations where it was his family. They were very high level, and they'd been also raised in these cults. And he tells a very fascinating story. I'll save it for people to go check it out on my channel. But you know, I've spoken to him even off the air about some of his experiences trying to pull away. And he's like, it is possible to get out, but it's quite the process. And he actually breaks that process down in the interview. I interviewed a psychotherapist just outside of my hometown about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, where she started just realizing that a lot of her clients were talking about ritualistic abuse. And she would do hypnotism, she would do regression and all these things, and then also just normal psychotherapy using the concepts of Carl Jung and whatnot. And these people started recounting these horrific tales. They were younger, you know, ritual abuse, sexual abuse, these kinds of things. And so she started opening up her practice to say, hey, you know, a lot of these other therapists out there are just pushing these people away and saying, oh, you're just masking trauma with another trauma, you know, and it's not real. And she said, I'll listen to you. And all of a sudden, her whole practice was filled with these people. And the moment she started going to the papers, the moment she started trying to, you know, report this to the authorities locally, all of a sudden she started, she found big satanic symbols all over her building, spray paint on it. She found like just these really weird, there's like corpses of animals left on her doorstep. She started getting threats. Even police officers that she was speaking to looked at her dead in the face and said, you drop this, don't even go here. We're not gonna, you can't, it's not safe, but don't even think about it. And so I've spoken to people that have both been involved in some of these things, and then also people that have been trying to help or discovered this sort of dark underworld just by doing their clinical work, taking it seriously, looking into it even more, and realizing this is a lot more prevalent than I originally thought, you know? So I've definitely had some interesting conversations, that's for sure.
So I read a book by John Ronson, and he mentioned Scientology. And I was on the streets of London several years ago, and they were out there with their clipboards. I thought, okay, I'm going to play along with this, you know, just go in and see what they're about. Right. What's your perspective on Scientology?
It's definitely a cult. It's a huge hit in Hollywood. It's loaded with pedophilia and all the other stuff. There's some very high profile people that are involved in that. A lot of interesting money behind that, and also some other connections to various satanic cults as well. It's through the symbolism. You can look at the symbolism alone.
What's the interest of people like Tom Cruise signing up for this? How is it reciprocated?
I think it's like, for some, and I don't know in specifically Tom Cruise's case, I think for some it's career advancement. It's, you know, it's something that, you know, when you get into that high profile Hollywood business, I mean, the mental health of a lot of those people must be absolute garbage, you know, like it's just, you can imagine what it's like to be that profile of a celebrity. A lot of them get sick of fads really quickly. They want the next biggest thing. So Scientology was just packaged perfectly to be like, this is the next biggest thing. We got John Travolta involved with it, Tom Cruise, and now that's almost used as a, hey, look, these celebrities are into it, so therefore it's legitimate. And to what degree any of these celebrities or people know about the deeper, darker connections or the stuff going on behind the scenes, I don't know. We'd have to talk to each one of them and see what they're involved with. Some people believe that all of them are involved in, some very dark stuff. Some people think it's just some, but it makes sense to me that if you're going to have a new cult in town, you're going to cast a really wide net. It's going to be compartmentalized, just like masonry. There's degrees, right? So the lower degrees, they think they got all the info. They think they know everything, but there's degrees above them that, they have higher levels of information, and then it just keeps going through. So in my opinion, Scientology is just a recruitment program and a filtration program to see if they can get certain people into higher levels of the cult.
So one of the most fascinating parts of your videos is the French guy, I think he is, and is it the Rainier?
The Raelians.
Raelians. Could you describe who the Raelians are and who the leader was?
Oh, the Raelians. Yes. The crazy thing about the Raelian research is, like, I don't speak French, and so the whole thing, a lot of it is French. So I had to use Google Translate quite a bit to get into that one. But basically, it's a UFO cult. And I'm somebody that walks in the ufology circles and speaks to like a lot of different researchers on the subject. And I've seen, just looking at that whole paranormal world of research, many cults, not people that are doing ritualistic sacrifices, but these sort of like bizarre, freaky deaky, I was abducted by an alien and the alien gave me the message to give to the world, and now I'm the new savior. This is the kind of thing that came from the Raelians, was that Rael, he renamed himself. He said he was he saw UFOs since he was a kid. He was abducted by aliens. And then they basically gave him this very advanced ethos to give to humanity. And again, it had all the same things, very similar to Christianity, very similar to a lot of Gnostic principles that mixed in the ET element. Jesus was an alien, these kinds of things, right? And then it turned into a big sex cult, really, is what it was. It ended up, it had branches all over the world. I think there still are branches. And it follows that same thing. We've got to start a commune, separate from society. We have the advanced enlightened information from, I don't know what, I think it's the Raelians, right? The Raelians are the actual ET groups that we're getting our information from. These are all channeled. There's all these channelers. And then they channel it through sexual activity and things like that, which is also very interesting because a lot of the elements in ancient rituals from different cults from the ancient world, there's a lot of the sex magic, sex tantra type things, because the sexual energy in a human being is very unique, and it produces different endorphins in the brain, and there's different ways that they try to play with that energy. So the Raelian cult is it also, oh my God, it also got into cloning, human cloning. They were trying to say that they'd done the first human cloning experiment. Whether that's true or not, I'll leave that to everybody to decide for themselves. But there was just some interesting elements of it that were, the symbol is, it's really interesting because it almost resembles like a Star of David. It's like a blend between Judaism, Christianity, and ufology. And then also these elements of these sexual ritualistic magic type ceremonies as well. So really bizarre. And it's something I'm actually still researching, Sean, because I'm still trying to get everything translated so that I can read through the actual writings and watch the interviews in much more detail. Because there's only a few interviews you can find with Rael that are translated or at least have subtitles.
They're worth watching, though.
They are really bizarre stuff.
Are most cults run by men trying to exploit women for sex? Are the cults run by women?
It's funny, when I did this was last year I did this series, and it was right during the big explosion of people like Dr. Jordan Peterson, the whole rise of modern feminism, the whole men versus women debate came back, the battle of the sexes. And so I was doing all these cults. I'm like, yeah, well, here's all the male figures, there's lots of those. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there are just as many female cult leaders. I documented many. There was the Australian one. Oh my God, her name is slipping my mind right now. She started a cult called The Family. And so think about the difference between the power of a male and the power of a female. So the power of a male will be, I'm the patriarch who's going to lead you to the gates of heaven. I've got the courage, I've got the charisma, I've got the logic, all that. But then the female is going to be, I'm the nurturer, I'm the mother, I'm going to take care of you. And there's that feminine vibe of we're going to create a family and we're going to take care of everybody. And it's all based on compassion and coming together as one. And so there's a different way that I find the male cult leaders will bring people into the fold versus the female cult leaders. Sad to say, a lot of the female cult leaders the stuff that they do with children is even more sickening, because it's not just as simple as some cult grabbing some kids off the street and then torturing or abusing them. It's systematic. It's done over years. We're going to create this new family, and I'm going to dye all these kids' hair blonde. I'm going to raise them and train them like pets, and I'm going to take them for walks like they're pets. I'm going to restrict their food. I'm going to be the nurturing mother on one side, but I'm going to be the dark, mother on the other side to make sure they keep in line. And there's this psychological play that would take place. There was cult leaders. There was one female from Brazil who started a cult where she actually got a bunch of doctors and lawyers in Brazil to be a part of the cult and work for her to procure children from the street and then bring them in so that she could use them for some very grotesque rituals that I won't repeat exactly what they did to these children. But there was a whole spree of missing children, and then reports of mutilated bodies being found. And the detectives that reported this case were saying that the level of violence that was seen is something that turned my stomach and made me want to quit my career. It was horrifying. And these are seasoned, hardcore detectives in Brazil. I'm sure they see a lot of really interesting stuff. And she actually got off. She defended herself in court, got off with a slap on the wrist. It was the same with this other lady. I should have her name in front of me here, who was in Australia, where she actually lived to the age of 98 years old, only ended up paying a $5,000 fine, and got off scot-free. And, so that's an interesting thing to look at, is that evil is something that any human being is capable of. Doesn't matter the race, doesn't matter the gender. It doesn't matter. All of us, it's like what Solzhenitsyn said, the heart of evil exists. There's an element of evil that strikes through the heart of all of us. Solzhenitsyn, he survived the gulags. He watched what happened in the Soviet Union. He watched good, well-meaning people turn into something that was horrifying. And so it's like when people start to say, oh, cults are mostly done by men because they just want sexual favors from women, although that does exist. Hello, Nixium and so many others, right? But you forget that there's also this female element, and we can't ever take that off the table. And that when you look at a female cult leader, to me, it's almost more evil just because it's in a child's mind, that's the mother archetype. That's the maternal nurturing archetype. And when somebody uses that as a lure to bring that child in and then basically mind control them and turn them into little slaves, what could be more evil than that? Yet we don't hear about it in the media. No one wants to talk about it because it's too taboo. And you know what? If we can't talk about it as a society, then it will continue to exist.
Talking about women getting off scot-free, I'm just watching Filthy Rich now on Netflix about Epstein, and it's just repeated over and over what Ghislaine Maxwell did to these kids. She's off scot-free. The court just recently upheld the sweetheart deal, non-prosecution of co-defendants. What's your take on Ghislaine Maxwell?
Well, she's just as culpable. I mean, and it's not just her and Epstein. They're just they're at a certain level. They're guilty of certain crimes, and I hope the whole world gets to wake up to see what kind of level of people were involved with what they were doing. But the focus has shifted to them, which is interesting. So Ghislaine Maxwell, as far as we know, she's just as culpable. There's many other people involved, and myself and many others are really hoping that they were able to get at least some information before Epstein killed himself, and they were able to find out what level of network was involved of both high powerful profile men and high powerful profile women.
Do you think that's going to go about as far as the CIA investigating itself for drug trafficking?
Well, logically, you could say yes. Of course, they're not going to really start investigating themselves, so it's going to have to come from somewhere else. And there's rumors of other rogue elements in different agencies that are trying to get more information on it and expose it. And there's even journalists that have been trying to document this. What was that one female journalist that she was caught on the hot mic off air? And she was saying, I've had the Epstein story for this long. I was going to do it, and then they said I couldn't air it. And I'm kicking myself now because I had the story. And that story, Epstein will wake the whole world up if they really look into it. That's a story that'll wake everybody up because it just shows how big it is. You start to realize this isn't just a couple Colombian drug lords or some MS-13 gangs or some local rinky-dink psychos that are running some weird trafficking cults or whatever, the underground criminal world. This is something that is embedded at the highest levels. And as your film shows, as the film Out of Shadows shows, that was released in America, that's got, 25 million views now. People are starting to really see just how deep and dark it goes and how high up the totem pole it goes. We're talking, there's implications for members of the royal family. There's implications on members of the media. There's implications of numerous politicians who I won't name, but who have been on the manifests flying to this Epstein Island multiple times. When it's funny because they have their own planes and their own jets. Why would they use his jet? What's up with that? And why would they keep going back to this island that is now implicated for all these really crazy sex rituals and human trafficking and whatever? So if someone like Ghislaine Maxwell and other people that were involved are now just the focus of the media needs to also start asking the real questions and go, okay, who were the names of the people that you were working with? Well, how big does this network go? And when you don't see journalists really digging into that, and instead they're trying to debate whether Epstein killed himself or not, you'll start to realize that, yeah, this runs up to the top. And there are people who are actively trying to suppress this story.
Are there any cults that are harmless?
Maybe I've just gotten an aversion to that word cult that I'm like, no, they're all harmful. I mean, and even if you could say, okay, there's a cult that isn't into some very violent types of activities or trying to, mind control people and get them to kill themselves or whatever, you could say, well, they're just a benign cult that just likes to, they're just into some voodoo and some mysticism and some esoteric stuff. And they're not violent. I would still have a problem with it because I believe firmly that the minute you get stuck into linear thinking and you only view all the information you get and all the experiences you have through this one very narrow lens of interpretation of reality, of life, of who you are, then I don't think that's healthy. I think it's far more healthy to be connected to finding out what the real truth of those big questions that we all ask ourselves are, which are, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? What kind of world am I living in? Those are the key philosophical foundational questions. Those questions are what drive people to join cults to begin with. But the problem is when you go into these cults that become very conformist, very uniformitarian, and they isolate you from the rest of the world, then the problem is you're incapable of connecting to other humans and connecting to other ideas. You start to sever your empathy from those people, and then it starts to justify mob herd mentality where we're like, well, our cult is more right than your cult, and our God is better than your God, and our interpretation of these holy texts is better than your interpretation of these holy texts. It's actually happening even in the scientific community these days, Sean. I mean, there's a lot of people that would say there's become a cult of science that has risen up within the scientific establishment. I'm going to be doing soon a series on the cult of the medics, coming into many doctors and researchers from the pharmaceutical world or the medical world who've actually said, no, it operates like a cult, with the ritual mutilations, with the fact that you can't defy the authority, you can't think outside the box. There's the fact that they're no longer using the scientific method. They're using propaganda and indoctrination and censorship and these kinds of things. So when I see this happening even in the modern world with all this censorship of alternative information, like say your podcast, my podcast, documentary films, etc., people like Dr. Judy Mikovits, who've been kicked off the entire airwaves completely for telling her story, you start to realize, well, in science, we debate things and we discuss things, and the best evidence wins, the best argument wins until a new argument comes and dethrones it. Well, we start to see that many in the establishments are moving away from that, and they're using big money and big influence to actually corral maverick free thinkers and kick them out of the public eye, so that people, when they think of medical science and the best way to achieve optimal health, they're only getting that information from one lens that has a lot of questions behind it. Same in religion, same in politics. You could say there's political cults. People get, I feel like it's something that we do when we abnegate our own personal responsibility, and we operate out of a basis of fear and trauma. Maybe there was something that happened to you as a child or something like that you could you never healed. You never took the time to heal that trauma. So that trauma can put you into a place where you're going to do things you otherwise wouldn't do. And you're influenced a lot easier because you haven't addressed that inner trauma. So when I think of a negative or a positive cult, I still have an issue, because I feel like, personally speaking, this is just my opinion, your road to discovering the truth, your road to connecting to the cosmos, to God, to nature, to your community of human beings or whatever, is yours. And even though you will join different groups and be a part of different communities, and you will learn from many teachers and guides, you have to have a strong immune system in your consciousness to weed out those nefarious people that will crop up, that are sick themselves. These are just people that are sick. It's all psychology. The Mansons, the Applewhites, the Jim Joneses, they are people who are sick, who are trying to say, we're the doctors. So if you don't know how to be your own doctor and your own guru, like Krishnamurti, he's one of my favorite icons. He said, you don't need a guru and a teacher and a savior and a leader. You are the teacher and the guru and the savior and the leader. You are everything. If you keep believing that you need these vicars and these priests and these cult leaders and these politicians to live your life for you, then you're not really following the true path towards spirituality, and you will end up in a worse situation one way or another, either psychologically, or it could even lead to your demise, as we've seen in many of these cases.
Do you think freedom of religion, as guaranteed under the Constitution, is a double-edged sword that allows cults to thrive and survive?
That's a very good question, man. That's a very good question. I've thought about this a lot. Given what I know, and given what I know about certain cults and religions, I would just have to say we have to be careful with giving government power anytime. Okay, so morally and philosophically, I could say, well, I wouldn't want to allow in my society, that I hope a society would be based on freedom and prosperity and enlightenment. I don't want to allow these pestilences to exist where they're going to manipulate the minds of children and pull them into these gangs and cults. I don't want that to exist. But I also don't want to restrict freedom. So it is a double-edged sword, and it's a debate that needs to be had, probably with smarter people than me, because I'm at a point where I'm like, I just want to see this get exposed so that people can now have at least an alarm system so they can be equipped with it. I'm a free market guy. I'm a freedom guy as best as possible, but I also respect the rule of law, and I understand that we need to stop violence. So if a cult or religion is preaching violence or practicing violence, or convincing people to commit suicide, well, now we're dealing with, I think, slaughter of the innocent, manslaughter, murder, criminal negligence, and these are things that are triable by law anyways. So if we actually enforce the laws, maybe we wouldn't have a lot of these problems. And if we didn't have money funneling from the drug cartels that are being worked with organizations like the CIA and other things, if we didn't have that corruption within the apparatus, and we actually upheld our laws, we might not have the same kind of problem we do. So the question would be, well, where do we go from here? And I guess that's where it comes to exposing this information to the critical mass, speaking to people on an individual level, so that whatever society does, at least the individual's now equipped with the knowledge of, let's look out for the signs. Let's look out for those things that that should at least put up red flags whenever I'm getting involved with any kind of new spiritual practice or religion or whatever.
Well, you're very easy to talk to, David, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the people watching this?
First of all, just thanks for listening to me. Sean, thank you so much for having me on. I'd love to also have further discussions with you. People need to watch your film. They need to watch films like Out of Shadows. Come check out my cult series. Give me honest feedback. I'm up for constructive criticism. I want to make this the best that it can be. I'm actually going to be redoing a series that's going to be shorter, like 30-minute episodes that are going to be a little bit highly produced. And is we're going to go into different elements of these cults that I didn't get into in my series, so people can stay tuned for that. But I would just say, you know, listen to the great teachers that were trying to free you. Listen to those people. Don't go to the people that are trying to entrap you in some kind of system of whatever. Learn to listen to the real teachers who, what did Khalil Gibran say? He said, the teacher who is indeed wise shows you the wisdom of your own mind and doesn't beckon you under the roof of their house. So listen to those teachers. That's the key to not getting sucked into these cults and these religions that could lead you astray, literally. And sharpen your critical analysis, sharpen your reason, sharpen your connection with your intuition. Your intuition never lies to you. And it's only when you willfully shut it off that those alarm systems are now silenced, and then you can be the person that's selling thing and selling you spirituality and selling you basically everything you're seeking. Everything you're seeking is found within you. That's what I feel, and that's just me echoing the teachers that have inspired me and have kept me from getting involved with any of these different things. So, you know, I hope more of this comes to light. I feel like we're in an age where people are ready to hear this. They're ready to look at it, as dark as some of it might seem. If we can look at it and we can face it, then we can be rid of it. We have to learn how to look at our own shadow, like what Carl Jung was trying to teach the world, was like, address your shadow. Don't repress it, address it, integrate it. And then it's going to give you a new set of eyes that's going to allow you to navigate this world without getting pulled into all these different nets that are there to entrap us constantly. So I just encourage people to go on their own journey of discovery and learn to listen to their own inner wisdom as opposed to just always following the whims of others.
You should write a book on this stuff. Some of the people watching this are going to want to follow you on your socials, and I'm going to put all the links in the description box below this video. Which socials are you on, and what is the preferred method of people messaging you?
I would say I'm on Facebook. You can just find me, David Whitehead. I also have a page, The Way of the Truth Warrior. That's for my podcast. I really like Instagram. I've been doing some stories every day. I've been, so Instagram is there. You can follow me at DW Truth Warrior. I'm sort of on Twitter, but Twitter, Twitter's Twitter, right? And then, I'm on YouTube for as long as they'll have me. I've had some streams censored, but hey, whatever, we're doing the best we can. But those are the best places to find me. And if you just message me on either Instagram or Facebook, I get lots of messages all the time. I do my very best to read each one and get back to you. But anybody that wants to reach out to me, that's probably the best way to do it.
Brilliant. So all of David's links are in the description box below this video. I urge you to go down, check out his stuff, subscribe to his channel, and watch the hours and hours of fascinating content, clips of gurus talking about all of the Martian philosophies. It is really intriguing and entertaining, to say the least. Huge thank you to all the new subscribers to my channel. If you've not subscribed yet, subscription logo is in the bottom right-hand corner. And we appreciate you leaving your comments and questions below. So cheers from London, and thank you for your time, David.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, everybody, for watching.